But this is a chance for all of us in Congress to sort of begin at a new baseline and stop spreading the myth of American exceptionalism and accept the fact that this is exactly who we are, and this is exactly who we've been throughout our country's history. Whenever there's social progress, there's white backlash.
Congressman Jamaal Bowman gets to state this openly racist rhetoric. Worst of all, he gets no pushback. Well, I'm going to push back, but with a twist of understanding. So the clip that I just played of the congressman is obviously openly racist rhetoric. It's anti-white. Anyone that stands in the way of the progressive ideology can be struck down by accusations of racism while denigrating them based on the color of their skin. My first response was one of anger. Immediately, I thought I'd make a sarcastic, angry video describing the utter hypocrisy of condoning and encouraging BLM and Antifa rioting and looting. And I mean that actually literally. Did you know, for example, that there is a book that was promoted on NPR and other leftist strongholds called, and I'm not making this up, In Defense of Looting? It in fact has a publisher that has paid for the rights and has sold non-ironically purchased copies, likely convincing some, yeah, looting and pillaging, it might harm a couple of people, but society overall is better because of it. That's logic for you. For the last 7 months, the leftist media has been gaslighting and giving cover to physical attacks while using a singular riot from the right-hand side of the aisle. Granted, the optics look terrible because it was upon Capitol Hill, and they are using that as an excuse and cudgel to go after the freedoms of all Americans and labeling all U.S. citizens who voted for Trump as white supremacists. So I'm going to show you a couple of clips here, but rest assured that I promise you that I'm going to get to the heart of the matter and the crux of why you might have originally clicked on this video link. And if you feel that I've expressed something here that resonates with you or that would resonate with somebody else, please by all means share the video and thumb it up on YouTube. Just hit that little like button to ensure that more people are able to access material like this. Just share the video, thumb it up, turn that like button blue. There's a little dopamine hit when you do. It feels good, I promise. Here we go.
The threat of white supremacy looms large, and it is tragic that it took this insurrection and this attempt to interrupt the peaceful transfer of power, and moreover, injury and loss of life, for many to appreciate just how formidable the threat of white supremacy is.
Let's get this out of the way. There's obviously tremendous asymmetry in terms of what I can say, what you can say, versus a woke person of color. If you were to demonize someone based on their race, the reflexive, violent reaction from the left would be to shout and cancel you, to cancel me, with the ubiquitous accusations of us being ignorant, white supremacists that they're already doing, as well as the need for us to go into re-education camps.
We had a program addressing white supremacists that we had programs, federal programs, that went towards funding organizations like these that de-radicalized people. And President Trump pulled the plug on federal funding for some of these programs. And so one thing that we know is that we have to get that funding right back up, and we probably need to double, triple, quadruple, or increase funding for these de-radicalization programs.
So I was feeling kind of the oppression of the left after I saw these clips. I wasn't feeling very good about it. And my natural instinct was to fight back immediately. And then a voice came and it just said, just simmer down, relax. So I did. And a few minutes later, I was engulfed. A wave of sadness kind of came over my body. And rather than fight against it, I just tried to understand where that reaction might be coming from, why I was having it. So the first thought that I had is that the color of my skin, my race, was being used as a cudgel against me. that anytime that somebody doesn't like an idea I espouse, an immutable characteristic leaves me open to the invariable attack and natural forthcoming straw man by shifting the focus away from the logic of my point or my argument to, unfortunately, the color of my skin. Maybe you guys have felt that at some point or another. And then it dawned on me. Almost all of my black friends at one point or another have described to me incidents where they felt that they were attacked based on the color of their skin, that they experienced racism, that the color of their skin precipitated very negative and acrimonious statements from white folk or actions that were directed at them that they felt was only the result of them being black. In some of the stories, the actions were very clearly racist, or there was a point blank epitaph that was racial epitaph that was stated and directed at them. In other of the stories, the actions could be explained by racism or possibly another cause. There are other explanations. Just to give you an example, I myself have had 2 separate incidents where police pinned me down to the ground, handcuffed me, and accused me of very heinous crimes. Wasn't pleasant. On one of those occasions, I was held for hours. My car was searched. Then my apartment. I agreed to let them come home with me after about 4 hours of being held and search my apartment because that was the one way that they might let me go, because I had to go to work in about 2.5 hours from the time that we headed over to my apartment. So I got almost no sleep. It was a case of mistaken identity. And I tell you, if I was black and I had been pre-framed by all the horrendous stories about the po-po and their underlying hatred of people of color, I would have had to assume their mistreatment of me was purely because they were racist. But because I'm white, I just assumed that they were overly aggressive and really terrible at their jobs. Boy, they wasted so much time with me. It was sick. About 5 officers surrounding me the whole time. And now we come to the crux of it, because my black friends have insisted that I'll never know what it's like to be black in America. But today, dare I say it, maybe I do know, even if the feeling is merely one that runs in parallel to theirs. I have a much greater idea. You see, with the tidal wave of the anti-white rhetoric coming from the left-hand side of the aisle, with congressmen being able to preach the evils of whiteness, able to denigrate people based on who they voted for as white supremacists, with the continual onslaught based solely on the color of somebody's skin, I believe that I am beginning to develop an idea of what it feels like to be attacked based on your race. And it sucks. It really does. It makes me feel more distant from other people. It makes me less trusting of anyone who I might associate with being a potential accuser of mine. And as I gain this understanding, as I have this feeling, the question that I ask myself is this why, based on the actions of a few truly malevolent people that do exist in this world, so many of my black friends harbor underlying resentments towards white people? Even though I would estimate that 99.8% of us don't care one iota what color of skin you have. You see, if you accuse somebody once or twice of acting badly towards you, of having nefarious intentions, and they don't really have that, most people are decent and they'll desire to understand your position. The natural assumption that if you're mad at me, that it is for, at least in your mind, a valid reason. And I want to address your concern and see if we come to some harmonious agreement and possibly just resolve the central issue that you might be having. But when you make the solution impossible, aka, for example, to solve systemic racism, which, by the way, did exist in the past, but today the goalposts of defining it are shifting on a continual basis. And in the United States, you're very unlikely to actually unearth anything like it unless you're referring to affirmative action or Joe Biden's new promise to give away COVID business relief based along racial lines.
Our priority will be Black, Latino, Asian, and Native American-owned small businesses, women-owned businesses, and finally having equal access to resources needed to reopen and rebuild.
Or perhaps you choose to define the problem as something that occurred so far in the past that nobody alive today was born when that was going on. When personally, I didn't have a single ancestor in the United States. And then when I disagree, you continue to use your magical and mythical white supremacist cudgel in an attempt to get me to acquiesce to your wishes. The natural instinct of any person is to run away as fast as humanly possible. But if, after they've moved away and distanced themselves from you, you keep coming after your opponent, when you try to exert force over them, when you destroy their businesses, when you try to literally tread on them by taking away their rights, their money, their future, at some point you have to expect the snake coiled in a ball, rattling its tail in warning, to strike. Is America a perfect place? No, of course not. But America has to be compared to the rest of the world, not to the dreamed of utopia. What's more is that Americans have a history of bettering the nation over time, of slowly living up to the principles that were enshrined in our great Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is why 99.9% of Americans alive today would have fought on the side of the Union during the Civil War in an effort to free the slaves and abolish this horrific practice which still exists today in some areas of the world. Libya, anybody? This picture is of an open-air slave market that exists there. It's why when Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier and entered into Major League Baseball, and some of the true racists out there denigrated him and threatened him, they stood in the way of his pursuit of happiness, of what was his God-given right, based solely on the color of his skin. And I would have told every single one of those haters how wrong they were, and I would have stood in the stands and cheered loudly for Jackie. When Martin Luther King, in his I Have a Dream speech,
I have a dream. My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
I wish I had been alive to be able to march by the side of this great man. And I wish I would have been able to listen to his soaring oration in person. What he demanded was equal opportunity and acknowledgement that God created him as an equal. And today, as the vitriol and hatred from the left rises, coming at us unfiltered with greater volume and velocity, I feel it. I feel the hatred, like blacks must have felt in the South during the Jim Crow era, where such pronouncements were deemed acceptable by polite civilization. But today, there are congressmen that are spreading this hateful racism, denigrating others like me based on the color of my skin. I imagine this might be how Vivian Malone Jones felt as Governor Wallace stood in front of her, following through on his promise to personally block the integration of the University of Alabama, hating her, blaming her merely because she was black, and wanting a better future for herself. I feel that because the politicians of today are greatly ratcheting up their hateful rhetoric. And so I say to all the Jackie Robinsons of the world, to all the MLKs, to all of my friends, no matter what color of skin you are, who have experienced real racism, who just want to be treated as an equal, to be judged based on your talents and your character, I feel you. I truly do. And I'm not even all that sensitive. I deal with rejection. I deal with theft of one kind or another. I deal with being scorned on a regular basis. But the words of the left that are hurtling at us with ever-increasing velocity and vitriol unchecked by their ideological counterparts, it hurts the soul. And as I gain a greater understanding of how you might have felt, I hope that you can be empathic with how many of us are starting to feel today. So I ask you, and I beseech you, let's stand united by the values of America set forth by Thomas Jefferson. Let us stand up against this new form of racism, this weaponized hatred being used firmly to divide our nation. Please understand that other human beings are just like you, that we all feel generally the same way about various stimuli. And to stay silent in the face of this new great evil will result in the fabric of our nation fraying more and more quickly. We are on this great river of life together in this massive boat called America that, imperfect as it might be, it still protects the rest of the world from the predations of evil. And we are being more and more quickly subverted by hateful people who care only for their influence and political power and their own wealth. I see America going down that river with ever-increasing speed as the rapids grow stronger. And I'm telling you, I'm warning you, there is a gigantic waterfall that's not that far ahead, a big one that was going to destroy our boat and splinter us as a nation into a million pieces. Whether that waterfall is called civil war, the dissolution of the Union, or the destruction of our Constitution and Bill of Rights, I don't know. It could be a combination of those. But I do know that I seek peace first, that I desire unity, and I implore every American to search their heart and acknowledge just how far we have come as a nation in the last 250 years and work together to increase the opportunities that exist for everyone going forward. And I also will tell you that for the sake of my children, I am absolutely willing to defend their freedoms that have served our nation and the world and myself so well with my life if you continue to tread on them. And I will not stay silent. I will tell you that I recognize your pain, that we all have some, and that I implore you all, every single one of you, for peace and unity. And I will stand by that until you force me to pick up my gun. Violence is a last resort. Please, I beg of you, let's set our course and row together towards the shores of opportunity rather than going over the falls to the gleeful shores of China, Iran, and those who just want to watch the world burn. But I will defend freedom. I will defend our sacred First Amendment, and that includes Congressman Jamaal Bowman's right to state his hateful rhetoric. But I will not yield to attempts to silence my right to speak. So please, take a step back, because I'd much rather celebrate the 4th of July with you with fireworks and a barbecue than to take up arms against a fellow American. Peace.